Professor Jonathan Lipson and Gerald Posner, they review possible outcomes of the Justice Department's deal with Purdue Pharma in a New York Times op-ed. It reports that the Sackler family may use Purdue Pharma's bankruptcy plan to shield themselves from liability.
However, the Justice Department does have the option to walk away from the settlement if unsatisfied with any reorganization plan proposed for Purdue. Author of Pharma, Greed, Lies, and the Poisoning of America, Gerald Posner joins us to discuss how the Sackler family might escape a full accounting of their role in the horrific opioid epidemic. So great to have you back, sir.
Good to see you, Gerald.
Yeah, great to be with you, Crystal. Good to see you, Sagar.
Of course. So can you just give people the background here of the settlement in case they didn't follow the ins and outs closely, and then what your concern is going forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, essentially we're talking about, America's greatest prescription lethal drug epidemic ever in terms of the opioid crisis, and who's going to be held accountable and what the public information is about that. Will anybody ever be held responsible? So Purdue Pharma produced the most successful in terms of money, profits, opioid painkiller ever, OxyContin. The Sackler family owned Purdue Pharma. They were the private owners. It's not a public company. And they made billions of dollars off of it. So Oxy made $35 billion in sales from the time it went on sale in 1996. The Sacklers took out $10 billion, we know, from their own records at quarterly meetings. So they became billionaires off of this. Now the question is, what's going to happen? Purdue filed bankruptcy last year. That's fine. They're reorganizing. They'll have a plan soon. But the Sacklers aren't bankrupt. They have plenty of money. They went before the bankruptcy court and said, also protect us. We have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of suits against us, claiming that we oversaw the wrong marketing of this drug. The judge in the bankruptcy court did stay all of those lawsuits. They're working on getting sort of a proposal in there in the reorganization. The Sacklers will contribute some money. And meanwhile, as you said, the Justice Department just got a guilty plea from Purdue and $8 billion in fines. The Sacklers paid $225 million. It's about 2% of their value. And in that, they don't make any accountability, no responsibility, no statement of public worth, no disclosure of documents. So the question now is, will they walk out of the bankruptcy court free from any litigation? And if that happens, it would be a real travesty of justice.
Yeah, and Gerald, I mean, here's where I don't understand. What about criminal liability? I mean, we've seen here about some of the things that they've passed, what they knew about the opioid crisis. We're still offering these drugs at discount and so much more. What do we know on that front? Is it just totally ruled out?
It's not that it's ruled out, but as a practical matter it is. And you know how this operates. So that The Justice Department made a big deal in late November, when the guilty plea was done, and $8 billion was the headline of what was getting, which they'll only get pennies on the dollar from the federal government. Part of that deal makes the feds run Purdue in the future as a public benefits corporation, selling OxyContin itself. Now, we know the federal government doesn't do the best job with running, let's say, the VA. Now they're going to be in the private business of running a drug company to sell OxyContin. I don't think it's going to work very well. But they said, we're leaving the door open to criminal charges. Sounds great. But as a practical matter, nobody at Justice is looking into that. The state's attorneys generals, some of them have been absolutely super in Massachusetts and New York, they don't have the resources right now to expand into criminal probes. So it's likely that's not going to take place.
Gerald, I wanted to ask you about another related recent news item, which is top consulting firm McKinsey had gotten caught up in this because of the advice that they'd been giving Purdue about how to spike their Oxy sales. And they even, it was disclosed they had, after there was some legal liability that they were facing, they're like, destroy all the documents. I mean, this was all out in the public. And McKinsey just issued an apology for their behavior and their actions vis-a-vis Purdue Pharma. What did you make of that apology and their role here and the level of accountability that they've faced?
Well, I'll tell you, Crystal, I wrote about McKinsey in my book, in Pharma. I have them in a chapter. I describe how from 2008, they were a consultant to Purdue on all types of issues. They got them through the FDA on a reformulation of the drug. They were talking to them about boosting sales. And the news that came out recently, you're right, in the New York Times and other places, was that they even had a proposal that said, why don't we boost sales by going ahead and giving a rebate to pharmacists and others and to insurance companies based on the number of overdose deaths and people get addicted. It's absolutely something you couldn't make up in the craziest type of Hollywood film, but they actually had it as an idea. And now you're right. They have, quote unquote, apologized, but it's a non-apology apology. Their apology actually made a point of saying, we did not get involved or we did not help in any way to increase OxyContin sales. That's just wrong. I have to tell you that the record is clear, the documents are clear on that, and so they've tried to walk it back a little bit to save their reputation, but they should hang their head in shame over their role with Purdue for an 8 or 9 year period.
Yeah, absolutely right. And last question for you, Gerald. I mean, in this pandemic, we don't have all the numbers yet, but the anecdotal information suggests that addiction and overdose rates are probably this year going to be higher than ever. So even as we're talking about this accountability, as it's a past phenomenon, we're still very much in the middle of this crisis.
No question about it. As a matter of fact, opioid addiction rates are up, opioid use is up. And, you know, one of the hopes is the Sacklers are not being held accountable in the bankruptcy court because they aren't parties. And when the bankruptcy proceeding is over, we don't get a final judgment. We don't have discovery done in there as we would in a court case if there was a real case. And so there's a feeling among many of the victims' families, those who have lost children to opioids and others, it's not just about money, but it is about accountability. Tomorrow, the House Oversight Committee is having a hearing. They've called 2 members of the Sackler family who will appear before them. It's the first time since 1962 that a member of the Sackler family is testifying about drugs before a congressional committee. The last one was then in the Senate. 5 years ago, a Sackler family member was deposed. So this is one of the rare times we get them under oath. And let me tell you, I'm hoping the Oversight Committee will ask them who committed the crime. What I mean by that is Purdue just pleaded guilty to felonies for essentially kickbacks to doctors and defrauding the federal government, but they didn't say who did it. Ask those Sackler family members who the executives were, or were they responsible as the directors? 2, how much OxyContin dollars and profits are they leaving with from this settlement? They've offered up to $3 billion in the bankruptcy court. If they go up to 4, 5, or 6, are they still leaving with $5 or $6 billion in Oxy profits? Ask them that question. And will they commit to putting all of the documents they produce in the bankruptcy that are now sealed available to the public? I'd love to know that. The last thing I'm hoping the Oversight Committee will ask is where in the world is Richard Sackler? He was the one who was president of the company when Oxy was being sold. He was the one who was chairman in 2003, was head of marketing for a while and research and development. He's not appearing tomorrow. That's a shame. But a little window for possible public accountability is tomorrow on the Hill.
Well, we certainly hope they are listening to you. The book is Pharma, Greed, Lies, and the Poisoning of America. Gerald Posner, so great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerald.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure. More Rising for you after this.